1. My dad died. Classic start to a funny story. He was buried in a small village in Sussex. I was really close to my dad, so I visited his grave a lot. I still do. Don't worry, it gets funnier. I always took flowers and my mum visited a lot, and she always took flowers and my grandparents were still alive then, and they always took flowers. My dad's grave frequently resembled a solid 3rd place at the Chelsea Flower Show. Nice, but I felt bad for the guy buried next to my dad. He never had flowers. Died on Christmas Day, aged 37. No one left him flowers, and now there's a pop-up florist in the grave next door. So I started buying him flowers. I started buying flowers for a deceased man I'd never met. I did this for quite some time, but I never mentioned it to anyone. It was a little private joke with myself. I was making the world a better place, one bunch of flowers at a time. I know it sounds weird, but I came to think of him as a friend. I wondered if there was a hidden connection between us, something secretly drawing me to him. Maybe we went to the same school, played for the same football club, or whatever. So I googled his name, and 10 seconds later, I found him. His wife didn't leave him flowers because he'd murdered her. On Christmas Day. After he murdered his wife, he murdered her parents too. And after that, he jumped in front of the only train going through Balcombe Tunnel that Christmas night. That was why no one ever left him flowers. No one except me, of course. I left him flowers. I left him flowers every couple of weeks. Every couple of weeks for 2.5 years! I felt terrible for his wife and her parents. Now, I wasn't going to leave them flowers every couple of weeks for 2.5 years, but it did feel like I owed them some sort of apology. I found out where they were buried, bought flowers, and drove to their cemetery. As I was standing at their graves, mumbling apologies, a woman appeared behind me. She wanted to know who I was and why I was leaving flowers for her aunt and grandparents. Awkward. I explained, and she said, "Okay, that's weird, but quite sweet." I said, "Thanks. Yes, it is a bit weird," and oh god, I asked her out for a drink. Incredibly, she said yes. 2 years later, she said yes again when I asked her to marry me, because that is how I met my wife. End. I am absolutely losing my mind after reading this. Please read it. Read part 2 and 3 below. 2. We had 2 children, and last year they said they wanted to go to Disneyland. We saved up and booked it, but rather than say, "Sure, you want to go to Disneyland? Let's go to Disneyland," we decided to make them earn it. I told them they needed to raise £3,000. Every time they did something good, I'd add £10. Every time they were naughty, I'd take £10 away. £3,000 and we'd go to Disneyland immediately. So if they did 10 good things a day without being naughty, they could go in a month. Easy. Suddenly, they were perfect children. I'd get home from work and they'd be all, "How was your day? Can we take your coat?" I'd say, "This is nice." "Oh right, wait, I get it. Sure, add £10. And they'd say, £10, is that all? We said hi, took your coat." "Sure, okay, add £60. The day before we were due to go, they were on £2,950. We were playing frisbee in the park, and it landed next to a homeless guy. We went over and said, "Hello." His name was John, and he was an artist, and he did a very amusing Kermit the Frog impression. Walking home, it became clear my children had never seen a homeless person before. They wanted to know why he had so much stuff. I said he was living there, and they said, "But what about his house, and where does he wash, and what about his job?" I tried to explain homelessness, and they were like, "If he doesn't have any money, you should just give him some." Christ, I said, money doesn't grow on trees, and all the spare cash we have is taking us Disneyland. You can see where this is going. We got home and they said they had an announcement to make, like they were calling a press conference. They didn't want to spend that £2,950 on Disneyland. They wanted it to pay for that guy to have somewhere to live. Fucking hell, kids, we're going in the morning! I was like, okay, look, it's a really complicated issue and we don't even know him. And honestly, it's lovely, I'm so proud of you, but seriously, go to bed! We've got an early start! But they were adamant. I went back and told him the story and said, "Look, I can't cancel Disneyland and I don't have another $3,000 lying around, but we can pay for you to stay in a hostel for a bit." He cried and said no. I cried and said, "Seriously, they'll never forgive me." He said, "Okay, thank you," and I drove him to a hostel and booked him in. We stayed in touch and he came round for Christmas Day. Bless him, he brought a cuddly Mickey and Minnie Mouse with him. Lovely. Merry Christmas. End. 3. I lived next door to a couple called Lucy and Tim. They were both lovely, but very different to one another. He was a gregarious, "get in here and drink champagne with me" type. She was far more reserved. 2 years ago, completely out of the blue, Tim died. I went round with some flowers and a card and said, "Look, I don't want to intrude, I just want you to know that we're here if you need us." I gave her my number. She didn't use it. Not for the first 18 months, anyway. Last Christmas, we had 1 million people round for dinner, and it was early evening, and everyone was a bit drunk. The phone rang. Lucy. She said, "Matt, I've tried to kill myself." Fuck. I said, "Okay, I'm coming over. Can you let me in?" She said, "No, I've taken pills. I cannot move, but the kitchen door is open." I got someone to call an ambulance and went outside to climb over the fence. In my shorts and t-shirt. On Christmas night. It was freezing and starting to rain, but anyway, I climbed over the fence, slipped, got covered in mud, grazed my legs, but anyway, I went to the kitchen door and let myself in. She was sitting in an armchair with a vacant expression and said, "Matt, am I going to die?" I said, "I have no idea, to be honest. What exactly have you done?" "Pills," she said. "Pills and gin." I said, "Okay, how many pills?" Honest to God, she said 4. I went, 4? Is that all? I mean, my clothes were a mess. "How many gins?" She said, 2 large ones. "Are you kidding me?" She said, "I'm not going to die, am I?" I said, "You probably won't even have a hangover, you clown." There was a knock at the door. The paramedic. He asks how many pills she's had. She looks at me, arches a brow, and says, 12 pills. A lie. The paramedic asks how many gins, and again Lucy looks at me first, arches a brow, and lies through her teeth. 12 gins, she says. Christ. The paramedic caught on, and Lucy confessed. It was agreed she would probably survive 4 ibuprofen and a couple of gins, and the paramedic said she could come with me. I took her to my house and introduced her to everyone. Everyone, including John, our homeless friend from part 2, remember? They got along famously, and to cut a long story short, they just got engaged. Next year, they'll get married in the exact same village in which this story began. Aww.